Hello.
Welcome.
To...
We did try to do this last night, but we realised that there were so many fireworks. And it just
was very distracting for us.
So we tried it again.
So welcome to Lockdown 2. We hope that you're doing okay. And that
you managed to get out for a walk in the
sunshine. Today's Saturday. We think tomorrow, Sunday, when you're watching this, may well be a bit wet. But yeah, Saturday's been glorious. So yeah, we hope that you're doing okay. If there's anything we can pray for, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. But today we are starting a new series.
We have. No, we are.
We are.
We've just finished the book. Well, just finished our quarter. There's 4 parts of the Ruthless Elimination of Harry by John Mark Comer. We've all enjoyed that. And that's going to carry on through different parts of next year. Probably the next part is after Christmas.
We just revisit it a little bit every couple of months.
But this term we're looking at the Book of Ruth.
We are.
And we've actually, having had the discussions, I've actually quite enjoyed this and going into quite a lot of depth. So the idea of what we will do again on this moment on a Sunday in this conversation is that we'll come up with some things that we pick out for us.
Just some really brief ideas and a little bit of background about getting started on the book.
And then the depth work, or if you want to find out more about the passage, then you can go and see that in the Connect groups, and that'll be on the Connect group resource page, which you can find on the website.
Yeah, even if you're not part of the Connect group. If you're not, we'd love to encourage you to have a tryout of one of our Connect groups because they're really good fun. And we just would really encourage you to read Ruth as well. It's only 4 chapters. It's
really easy.
It's a really great story book as well, which we're going to come to in a minute. So delve in there, have a read of the whole thing, and that'll be really good.
Okay, so Ruth. Where is it?
So Ruth is in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And straight after the book of Judges.
Right.
So we've had all of the start of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, where God's people came out of Egypt, and they have come to the Promised Land. They've taken possession of the Promised Land, and now they're in this season of when God gave them judges to help them to live His way. And so the book of Judges, which just comes before Ruth, is the story of, Israel sinned and they fell away from God. They didn't keep living His way. And then God raised up a judge from amongst the Israelites who led the people back to living in God's way. And then there would be, years of peace, and then that person would die, and then Israel would fall away again. And so we'd have this kind of ongoing cycle of God's people saying, yes, with God, we want to live for you. Then falling into sin, not choosing God's way. God raises up a judge. So this is the kind of time period that we're in, and we're getting quite close to when God then allows the Israelites to have a king, and they're crying out to God, we want a king like all the other nations around them had. So we're getting quite close to that bit as we get to this story of Ruth. Yeah,
we are. So in terms of the author, we don't know who the author is, but as Catherine said, it's around the time period just before probably David takes place. So the story in itself is a story that moves from tragedy to blessing.
Yeah.
And the restorative character of God. Although God isn't mentioned very much in it, which is an interesting element, isn't it?
It is really interesting, yeah. And there's this whole story of redemption, I suppose, isn't it? It's like God redeems.
That was the word I was looking
for. There's redemption in the story, which of course speaks to the whole big story of the whole Bible, of the redemption that God has for us as well. And so it's really exciting. But one of the things that we really loved about it was, because I've just been I'm sort of reading through some of the books of the Old Testament. So I've just read Joshua and Judges. And in Joshua and Judges, you get all these really big narratives, Leviticus, Exodus, big stories about the whole of God's people, all of the Israelites, and these big mass movements of people and wars which involve, numbers, thousands of people in the tribe of Judah and the tribe of this. And so you get all of this. But this story of Ruth isn't like that, is it?
No, it's we have a family, an Israelite family, and the dynamic within that, and the situations that occur to them, just like, with us.
With our own families.
Yeah, and how it affects us. But the amazing thing is that having zoomed in on the family and the situations that occur, if we zoom out, we then see the impact of this particular character, Ruth,
and the narrative, and what happens to them.
And she ends up being where's she in the genealogy of?
So at the end, we hear that Ruth has a son called Obed.
Yeah.
Obed is the father of Jesse.
Yeah.
And Jesse is the father of David, who's King David.
Awesome.
And then, of course, King David is in the line of Jesus. So this kind of like
His
very
pocket.
small domestic
Yeah.
little short book of Ruth with 4
Has
chapters
a massive significance.
and it's so connected back into that further back
And the
into
thing
the
that
Old
I
Testament and forward.
and the thing that I relate to that is the fact that we oftentimes, when we're living our little lives, it's very easy to forget the impact that we can have generationally or nationally, internationally. You just don't know what's going to happen to your kids, or your grandkids.
Yeah, and so we see God's faithfulness and redemption within their own just narrative of their lives, but then we see how God uses their story, which they had no clue about, to be part of this big redemption story of the whole of humanity, as we see.
So you're going to read chapter 1, or that little snippet from chapter 1, and then we will just talk a little bit about it. It's okay, I'm going to go there. So the first line of that verse sets the tone of where we're at. So if you read that out, then we'll come back.
Okay, so I'm not going to read the whole of the first chapter. If you've got your Bible, or you've got a Bible on your phone, you might want to get it out so that you can see the whole chapter as well. But I'm just going to read the first few verses for us. So, in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home to Bethlehem from there. For with her 2 daughters-in-law she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah.
Great.
So the scene is set.
So we have this movement of this small family who are experiencing famine in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
And they've moved to Moab.
So they've left the promised land, in a sense, and gone to Moab, which is a different nation. And actually would have been a nation that they were quite frequently at war with. They're obviously at a time of peace at the moment because they were able to move there and come back again. But quite frequently the Israelites would have been at war with Moab.
Okay, so they move out and they go to this place, Moab. We have these characters that start cropping up. So we have the husband, Abimelech, and in terms of one of the things I've really interested in terms of this passage is the significance of the names, particularly Naomi. So we have the husband who is Abimelech, and his name is God is King, which is interesting. Elimelech, which is interesting in the fact that he comes from Bethlehem, because we know who is born in Bethlehem later on.
The significance.
And then we have the wife Naomi, and Naomi, the words mean sweet, and you were adding to that, wasn't it? So
sweet.
Kind
of sweet or lovely or pleasant. That's the kind of sense that you get from the name Naomi.
And so they go to the Moabites, and the Moabites are related to the Israelites through the line of Lot. And Lot was the nephew of Abraham.
Yeah. Read that story if you haven't. That's a good one too.
And in the passage, it looks like they were intending to stay a short time.
Yeah, because obviously they're just trying to be there to have food because there's a famine back in Bethlehem. So, and then Naomi goes through this kind of trauma. Her husband dies, but then she's still got her 2 sons, and they marry Moabite women. But clearly, they don't have any children in that time. Yeah. And then the 2 sons die, and we don't know how that happened. But Naomi has gone to Moab, empty of food but filled with family, and now she's empty of family as well. And so she says, I hear that God is providing for our people back in Bethlehem. Let's go back.
I think it's really important at that point, though, to at least for me, it relates to where we are at the moment, the trauma. You know, there'll be some people listening who are in places where actually COVID has had such a big impact. Yeah. It may have resulted in friends or relatives dying.
Yeah,
it may be the fact that there's a sense of loneliness, which is, so there's this expectation that Naomi had that this was going to be great.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And I think an element of disappointment we could quite easily relate to it hadn't turned out the way that she wanted it to.
And the sorrow and the sadness. And here we are again in lockdown, 2, when we'd all been hoping that things were just going to get better and better and better, and of course we're going through a second wave, and it's just so much.
And so it's interesting looking at her Naomi's reaction to what has happened. The two responses are, the first one is the fact that she sees this as the fact that her husband and her sons have died as a response to God's hand upon her life. That this is God.
So later on she says, the Lord has afflicted me and has brought misfortune upon me. And of course everything in us wants to go, no, it's not God. No, that's not who God is. And it's not God. God doesn't send things on us. But
oftentimes we can shout at God and say, "This is what is going? Where are you? We can't see you." Yeah. And you can see that through the Psalms as well.
Yeah.
But I think an element where actually this is God's fault. He is.
Yeah, and that's
making this happen.
Yeah,
that's not correct.
It's not right. It's not a right understanding of who God is. And yet, like you said, then also in this chapter we have where she says to her 2 daughters-in-law, because they're Moabites, they're not Israelites, and she says to them, you should go home, you should go back to your families, because you can go back and start again, you can get married and you can have a family, and you shouldn't want to come with me. I'm not going to have any more sons for you to marry, and feel free to go back. And one does, Orpah goes back, but Naomi says, but in the middle of all this whole conversation, Naomi says to them, may the Lord show kindness to you, as you've shown to me, and may the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. So
on the one hand, she's saying, this, I don't understand, where are you, God, because my life is falling
and on the
apart.
other hand, she's saying, but I know who God is, and I know that I want his blessing on you, and I want him to give you rest in your home, and I know that he's still there in the midst of all of this. And I think lots of us feel like that, don't we? It's like we know who God is and we trust him, and on the other hand we're going,
our situations don't make sense.
What is going on? When is this going to get better? When are things going to get easier? How is this going to get sorted out? So yes, there's a lot there that we can really relate to as well. So
then I find it interesting that if some commentators say that Ruth has gone home broken. She is bitter with God because of what's taking place. But you have to ask the question: if she was so bitter, why did Ruth stay to hang out with her?
Yeah.
Because and then say, she then says, if on here, your God, what does it say? Something else.
She says, where you go, I will go, and your people will be my people,
and your God
will be my God. Yeah.
So
this is Ruth talking to Naomi, saying, I'm not leaving you, I'm not going back to Moab, I'm going to stay with you and come with you.
So if that was if that was the way that Naomi saw God, why would Ruth follow a God who is vindictive?
Yeah.
Which suggests that Naomi didn't portray that
she was still the meaning of her name. She was still sweet and pleasant and lovely as a person, and yet she was afflicted by this sorrow and these things that had just emptied her of her loved ones, and and I don't think she was bitter, but life had been bitter, and I think that's the difference, isn't it? Like, we can have bitter things happen to us and awful tragedies and traumas such as we're living through at the moment, but we can choose not to allow it to make us a bitter person.
And I think that's where the interesting bit of her name comes in.
Yeah.
Because her name being sweet, she then goes back, when she travels back to Bethlehem and sees her friends, old friends, she calls herself, don't call me
Naomi,
call me Mara, which means bitter.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, that whole play on words, the play on names.
Yeah.
And I think that's more about how the taste of, this is what's going on with my life is bitter.
Yeah, and she'd come home to her friends and she was able to say to them finally, people that she'd grown up with, look at the tragedy that's happened in my life, and here I am, and I'm empty, coming back. But so we have this whole chapter, and then so finally Naomi comes back to Bethlehem with Ruth, who's committed herself to coming with Naomi and staying with her, even though she could have left, she could have gone, but she says, no, I'm staying with you, and actually commits herself to God, which wasn't her God, that says, this is my life now, you are my life, and so we start to see things start to,
and I love there's
set up for the next part.
There's one verse, the end of the chapter for me is amazing, because it kind of sets us up to hope that things are going to change.
Yeah.
So the verse, can you read out that verse?
So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
Because it suggests that there is going to be a plentiful amount of
harvest.
Yeah.
There is food.
Yeah.
There is plenty. There is being fed.
Which is amazing when if you get the opportunity to look at what the name Bethlehem means. Because again, you've got that significance between the harvest and the name of Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Well,
So we're sort of set up for chapter 2. They're arriving back in Bethlehem, and it's the harvest time, and that's going to be really significant for the story. If you know the story, if you already know that, and if you haven't read it, then you can get a head start on next week and read ahead. It's only 4 chapters, the whole book. But yeah, so we're going to look again next week at what happens.
So if you are part of the Connect group, and please join in the conversation about the passage and some of the things we could take out for how we look at blessing, how we deal with our pain and our suffering, and then how we look forward to what might be around the corner, and our trust in who God is and the character of God. You can look at those if you're not in a Connect group. They're available free on
the Connect group page of our website. Yeah.
So we hope you have a good week, and I hope that lockdown 2 this week isn't going to be too problematic for you. Please make sure that you chat to somebody on the phone, or you manage to. I think you're allowed to go out for a walk with one person.
Yeah. So
please get out in the sunshine, which I think it might be this week.
Yeah, and just give us a shout if we can help.
See you later. Bye. Hi guys, it's so good to have you this morning, whether it be on Facebook or on Zoom. We are Hemel Vineyard Church, and we're just doing life together as we follow Jesus. If you want to be part of that journey, then feel free to come and join us, whether it be on Zoom, again on Facebook next week, or drop us a line and have a conversation with us. We'd love to hear from you. Another place you can find out what's going on would be to check out our website, which is www.hemelvineyard.org.uk. I pray this week that you would know Jesus' love and his presence with you in whatever you face. See you next week. Bye.